Welcome to In Touch with iOS podcast, the show that talks about iPhone, iPad, Apple Watch, Apple TV, and related technologies. I'm your host, Dave Ginsburg, and this is a special episode this week. I have a special guest. I'd like to welcome to the show Grant Davis, the developer of Mimir, the podcast app that's on macOS and just now released on iOS. Welcome to the show, Grant.
Hello. Thank you, Dave. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm happy to have the opportunity to get on here and talk about my app a little bit.
Yeah, I love it. It was a very exciting. I'll kind of give you a background of it. I discovered the app in SetApp actually, and I know you're doing some stuff with that. We could talk about that in just a little bit here, and then we also talked about it a couple weeks ago. It was on episode 213. So you go back and listen to our initial discussion about it. But we're going to get nice and in depth here and find a little bit more about it. First off, tell me a little bit more about you, your background, and what got you into starting developing apps.
Sure. So my day job is a mobile app developer.
Okay.
So I've been in the business for quite a while now, and I work as a contract freelance developer. Mm-hmm. So for about, I guess it's been about 11 years now, I've been going solo. Before that, I worked at an ad agency and did website development. And this is even before, the phone was out. I was doing Flash websites,
oh, wow.
like a microsite type of thing. So I kind of got into development in a little bit of a kind of a backwards way because I went in as a graphic design major. So I'm actually not even a tech guy, ultimately. But I became one over time. So I started with a lot of animation and doing like graphic design layouts, got into a position which had me working with Flash applications. And it was kind of like a perfect merger between doing animation and design and programming all in one package. And I just fell in love with it. So that was kind of what got me into moving down to the developer route and sort of just embracing the creative drive I guess I have now to build things, create apps,
awesome,
and put things together. Yeah.
So this was Mimir was your very first app?
Not actually, no. So this is my second rodeo for a big app that I've tried to release and really make fly. So my first one was actually video game based. It was for an app called or for a game called League of Legends. I don't know if you're a gamer, but
I'm not. But
it's one of the big ones out there.
Well, we'll have to make sure I put that link in the show notes so people can see that.
Oh, yeah. So, the story of that is it's a complicated game. It's a very competitive game. It's like a 5-on-5 sort of scenario where you buy items for a character that you choose, and those items change your stats, and those stats end up being your build on how you operate in the game and kind of helps fill the role that you're going to play in your team, things like that. So my app was a build tool that made you go through and pick a champion, choose all their items, choose how they would put all those items together, and then you store that on your phone. And it actually became pretty popular. I paid my bills for it for about 2 years, and then got to the point where I made some unfortunate business mistakes where I kind of ended up losing some money, and then things kind of ended up shutting down after a few more years of trying to kind of let it limp along. But that was, one of those things where you make some business missteps and you learn from it and you try to move on from it. And it's one of those things where okay, do I really want to put time into it and keep it going? But, at the most it downloaded over 250,000 times and, had over 4.5 stars on the store. So I just, the fact that I got older, stopped playing games and stopped wanting to support it, I guess is kind of what killed it. Yeah, but that was my first app.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. So what inspired you to get into the app that would be a podcast app? Because that is definitely a different market compared to a lot of other apps that are out there. Yeah,
And a lot of people probably tell you you're crazy to go up against all the competition that's in the store, right?
Yeah.
So they'd say, "Why are you choosing a podcast app?" And I've answered that question quite a few times. But I also got into it a little bit in a selfish way. So I had a morning routine where I would just open up my laptop, make coffee, get my breakfast going and start cooking. And while I had my laptop open, I'd be playing podcasts on it. So I found in the morning, I was like, man, I spend 20 minutes just going through all the podcasts that I have to update. But I got to the point where I was trying to build a playlist every morning, and I'd spend enough time going through my podcast, trying to find each episode that I should drag into the up next list that I was like, man, this is really tedious. I need a better way of doing this. So my whole thought was I want to make a quick app on macOS. It'll give me a chance to learn macOS because I haven't done any development there before, but I've been doing Apple iPhone apps at that time for years. So I was like, yeah, it'll be a good opportunity to like freshen up my development skills, and also build a tool that will just basically tailor my morning experience the way I want it. So the whole idea was I'll make a playlist that's automatic, and I'll be able to go to my podcast and give them a priority value and say, this priority is higher than the other one, so I want to see these episodes show up more often in this playlist. And so that's kind of where the whole idea of this the concept of this feature for the continuous playback came into play. And then I kind of, evolved it a little bit more and put in some features where you could choose to pull from multiple podcasts, from groups, with different sort options, with different organizations, and just sort of a way to tailor it to how you want to listen to it at that time. So I have plans to further improve it in the future, but that's generally what got me into the idea of like, okay, maybe I should make a podcast app. And then I took it to a couple of my developer groups that I go to monthly, and they basically were just like, hey man, you should keep on working on it. Just throw it out to the store. So I listened to their advice and spent some of my free time in between contract jobs putting it together. And 2 years ago is when I launched the Mac app. Okay. And
I was going to ask you that.
That was kind of history.
2 years now. Okay, so you because iOS and iPadOS tend to be probably the more popular of the platform, I would think,
by far.
with podcast apps especially. But no, I like the fact that you have a Mac app, and you started with a Mac app, which was kind of great because I like to be able to listen to podcasts across all the platforms, even sometimes the Apple Watch, which I'll ask in a minute here. But but yeah, because I have my iPhone here, I have my iPad here, I have my Mac here. I like the fact of being able to be able to listen to it across the way there. So it's really cool that you started with that. So it looks like you had a lot of big updates here on your latest release of 1.5.0, right? What really stood out to you as far as what some of the big improvements and upgrades that you added to it?
So when I approached the iOS app, I did a lot of prep, I guess, on just checking out the store, seeing what was out there, seeing what I was up against. Basically downloaded all the popular apps, made checklists on, okay, this one does this good, this one does that good. And, I could work on this and, stand out in this area or that area. So I guess when I decided to actually go through with an iOS app, because I was reluctant. It was a side project. I wasn't really too excited about rewriting a whole new app in such a competitive space. But really, I guess what changed my mind was my users that were using the macOS app started to just ask for it. And they got to the point where they started asking enough where it's like, okay, I shouldn't ignore this anymore. And I should actually just try and do it and see if there's an audience for it and try to grow the thing. So I said, what the hell? And between contract jobs, I just decided to start working on that as my side project. And so as I took a look at iOS, I was like, okay, well, what are the big things that I really am missing? And one of the big problems that I had was I was using basically an audio player that was out of the box from Apple. So they give you an SDK and they give you an AV player, and that gives you okay quality when you're playing things back, right? But if you try to do something that's a little more advanced where you're like, okay, I want to speed this up to 2 times speed, you start hearing chipmunks all of a sudden and you have a really poor audio quality experience, right? And I also try to build in features with that audio player for doing some of the more advanced things like detecting silence and skipping it. So I had a lot of really tough workaround solutions for that, where I would like scan the file after you downloaded it, try to find the silence, and then tell it to skip around, which really led to kind of the kludgy experience in the player in general. And I wasn't very happy with it. So I decided one of the biggest things I was going to do with the iOS update was just throw in a whole new custom audio engine and spend some time learning digital processing and try to figure out if I could make my own. And after quite a long time of development, a lot of hours, I got to the point where I developed something that worked pretty well for the solutions that I was looking for. Drastically improved audio quality at higher frame playback speeds, much better silent skip, which is much more accurate now. Doesn't have the same sort of like, seeking sort of technology that it does before. Now it's just like, it just doesn't even send silent audio to be rendered anymore. So it's just completely removed, not even skipped over, right? So it's just gone. So those are things I wanted to really hit on. And then the other things I was missing was like a sync feature. If I was going to go hit iOS and Mac, they had to talk to each other. So and that was probably the most complicated feature of the app that I've spent the most hours on, was sync. It proved to be sort of unexpected challenge on how much went into it, because there's a lot of things you can use out of the box, but with the podcast app, you have a lot of data. You could have users with, I have some users that have like 6,000 podcasts in their library.
Oh my God, I thought I was bad.
Yeah, I know. So I have these metrics that just like make my head explode. I'm just like, okay, I have to have some kind of tool that will make this work well. So I took about 3 or 4 different stabs at actually writing the layer that integrates the sync between the devices. So I could probably give a whole tech talk on how that came together, but that was one of the bigger challenges for sure.
Yeah, I was going to talk a little bit about syncing, because syncing, I know of all the podcast apps, and if you're not aware of this, a couple of years ago, I did write an article about podcast apps in iPhone Life magazine. So I did go through a lot, and back that's going back for 3 or 4 years now. So things have changed a fair amount in the podcast app world, the podcaster, I guess we should call them, world. So, but the biggest challenge I always saw with these apps was the syncing, because I would use other apps and I would get so frustrated because I forgot to back it up and get an OPML file to make sure I have my entire library backed up, because I want to just restore it back to the way it was, and just getting it to sync. Because I started playing around with the Mimir and got it on my iPad, got it on my iPhone, got it on my Mac, and I could already see the challenges, and I knew it kind of going in because I've experienced it. I can kind of expect you probably, like you said, are having a bit of a challenge trying to get that to be just right, because what was happening is I would go between all 3 devices, and all of a sudden about half of my podcasts will be gone. They just disappear. So luckily, and that's why I said I always had a OPML backup and then just restored it back, and it seems like everything syncs back. So, but you probably, I can imagine you probably have a bit of a challenge with iCloud backup and it's syncing properly. Yeah.
And especially because of some of the constraints that I'm working with, being a solo developer, and a lot of what people do for a solution on the bigger apps out there is they'll make their own backend, and they'll have a user log in with an account, and they store everything in the library on the web server, which is an angle I didn't want to take because I'm time limited. And it's another thing where I'm like, okay, I need to kind of like prove the app before I spend that much time developing a whole backend system and try to really do basically a third part of not only a Mac app, an iOS app, and a backend, right? So what I ended up having to do is rely on iCloud, and there's still some issues there because you do have a library that's basically has a copy on every device, right? So each device is also responsible for updating the RSS feeds. That's not handled on the server side. So if you have a situation where one device A, uploads and downloads a new episode and puts it in their playlist, the other device is going to have to also update the RSS feed and then get the iCloud change and then be able to show that sync. So there's a couple of things that need to happen, and I'm not in love with how that works, because I had to basically say, okay, if I see an iCloud change come in for an episode that's not there, I have to tell the app to go update that RSS feed. So it's not as simple as just saying, okay, I can talk to a server and download the user's current state, which is where I'd like it to be. That's actually, it's a very solid solution, which is why so many podcast apps do it. But with my personal constraints, I felt I had a middle ground here that I had to find, and it works well enough.
Yeah. And I only wanted to bring that up. I wasn't jumping on that. Only the fact that it's a very common issue with all podcast apps. Let's be honest. I'm not going to mention the names. Everybody knows them. I'm here focusing on you, so I'm not going to advertise anybody else here at this point. But I've gone through every single one of these apps, and I probably have about 6 or 7 podcatchers on my iPhone right now that I just go between and just have my own thing, because like you're developing it. Me, I talk about it every week on the podcast, as well as I'm an enthusiast when it comes to just listening to podcasts. I have a set list. I'm nowhere near the 6,000 like the person you just said. That's absolutely. I don't even know how that database can handle it, but yeah, I just wanted to bring that up as far as that goes. But it's definitely a work in progress. You're definitely. I don't think you have to worry, but I just want to warn people. Yeah, you just make sure you're doing a backup of it right away, so you have a backup file with OPMLs.
And it's funny. So when you mentioned backups, actually, I had some issues with the databases, in really rare cases, sometimes going bad on a user's device. And so I actually spent some time, and this is kind of undocumented because it's kind of like oh God, something went wrong with the user's data and I need to help repair it. But I built in a backup system that's automatically happening on every device. So there's also sort of like a copy being made of your library. So if it detects that the database has been corrupted because of a poor save or bad data on a disk or something like that, you can actually restore your whole library from those backups. So I did go through enough thinking about, okay, what if they lose everything and what would that do? And how could I repair that? And so I did try to throw little solutions in there. So that's a little something that isn't really in the notes, but it's kind of a nice thing to mention because I spent some time on that.
Oh, great. Make sure we emphasize that. I go into your recommendations area of the app, and I really find it refreshing. I really like how you have it laid out and best in the United States, and just going through some of it. I like that. I like how you have it in little buttons as opposed to Apple Podcasts. I could say that because it's just. I'm not a fan, and we've talked about that before on the show. It's just, oh my God, it's so horrible. I just, as I mentioned to you, I did a presentation at MacStock about this, and most of the audience is like cringe. Oh, and then when I started talking about the other podcast apps like yours and I'll say Pocket Casts and Downcast and a lot of the others, they want to have people wanted to have an understanding what's going to make me want to have to go to a podcatcher as opposed to just using Apple Podcasts. Most podcasters, when they look at their stats, they see, especially if they're Apple oriented like I am, are probably consuming their podcast in one of two ways: Apple Podcasts, or maybe listening on the website or on the web, or maybe a link via Twitter or other places. So it definitely is a bit of a challenge. But I do like the way you've laid out the recommendations in the library and on the Mac app, and that does a great thing. I want to kind of go through. I like how you've got the getting started and the welcome to Mimir, and just kind of give people, the user, as an intro. You mentioned actually, I'll go this first. Adding RSS feeds is a huge thing, and I like how you've made it super easy to be able to add RSS feeds of a podcast, and that's kind of how a podcast lives is out on that RSS feed, and it seems to support it really well. And the groups, that's a great idea. I mean, I like the fact of being able to group podcasts into particular types of topics. Me probably having more tech and Apple oriented stuff would probably be a majority of what I have. But there's a lot of other podcasts out there that people listen to.
And that was one of those features that kind of hit me as a no-brainer. It's just such a simple thing that you want to organize your library and put things in logical groups, and no podcast app really seemed to solve that anywhere. So I was like, man, I really need to have this, and I want it to work like a normal Mac app does, with a sidebar that's collapsible and expandable and kind of tucks away, because I have, I think, 100 something plus podcasts in my personal library. So it's tedious enough that I want to go through and have everything kind of organized. But yeah, the organization of the library was definitely something I wanted to bring to the iOS as well, because I find myself in a lot of other apps just scrolling, trying to look for what I'm after. And it's a little easier for me to get around when I have some collapsed groups and can kind of just find my top 10, rows that are going to contain everything, and then I'm good to go. So yeah, thank you. I try to make it a little bit more flexible in the organization and I like that. And the sorting and stuff on the Mac side too. You can also customize the sorting in several different ways too. So yeah, that's all in there.
And then the two other items. This is smart to how you did this. Getting started. These are probably the top 4 things of any podcast listener is to setting up a podcatcher. Is this importing to the existing library, which I just talked about. You definitely want to have your backup file, but I like the fact you can restore from Apple Podcasts on any device, which I think is a good thing because people have a big library. Some people do in the Apple Podcast, but OPML is another format that all the other podcatchers use. You can easily import it. It was very seamless for me. So that was great.
I mean, I definitely noticed, like with the Mac app, that it can be a barrier for that people won't be willing to get over if they can't bring their library with them. Mm-hmm. So I've had a lot of people before I had the Apple Podcast feature emailing me. It's like, I can't use this app because I can't bring my stuff over. So please help, So that's kind of how I got down to finally getting Apple Podcast automatic support in there.
No, that was great. And then being able to discover new podcasts, I love that. I love the fact of being go to the search box, say, I found about this in the podcast. Let me type in the name, and you have a great link to the end, the search engines to go out there to find the podcast almost immediately, which is great.
And it's definitely something I want to expand on because, we're missing some things like, basic sharing features I'd like to get in. I have plans on adding in, MP3 chapter support. There's some other tags that you can support.
I was going to ask you about that, about chapters.
Yeah.
But that was one of the things that really stood out to me. Yeah.
Chapters and transcripts are definitely on my list that I've been asked about quite a bit. So those are definitely things that I can solve. And I've looked into the technical side of them, and they definitely are things I can do. It's just a matter of time,
of course.
And other features and all that. So
not critical, but and glad you're thinking of it.
Yeah, totally. And it's just, it's challenging because you do write a podcast app and you go up against all these competitors out there. And then the first thing you're asked is, okay, what does your app do that separates yourself out? And I go through all my lists and everything, but you're still up against 8 years of other people developing an app. And it's very hard to reach their bar, So it's like I had to make a choice of being like, okay, this is my core feature set. I got to get this out and we got to build on top of that. Yeah. So it is a matter of just I still got to prioritize, organize.
That's okay.
And hear
people will know
saying.
this is a fresh start of a podcast app, something different, something refreshing. And I think I like that because the other ones have been around for a long time. You want to have something new and unique, and I think this is a great idea to just keep going with that. So you had the Mac app. You've had it for, you said, now 2 years, which is awesome. And then the iOS app that just hit this past week as we record this, I believe.
Yep, 6 days ago.
Okay,
yep.
So and you had it in beta for a little while. When I found out about you again, and out before my presentation at MacStack, I wanted to do an iOS one. I got crud, you don't have one. I'm like, wait, you got test flight. Let me go, and you let me in right away to do the beta test. So I did a bit of a demo on that as well. So it's as looking through the iOS and the iPadOS app, it looks like you did a great job and kind of seamless bringing over a lot of the stuff that's in the Mac app over to those two platforms, which was great. SetApp, are you still pretty comfortable still sticking with SetApp, or are you?
Yeah, I am still going to be on SetApp. Right now, I'm actually working with them to get the new version on there. We've hit a bit of a snag with.
I was wondering about that because I was like, I want to go get SetApp.
Yeah, it's tough, they're in Ukraine, so our schedule is really difficult. And it's like they send me an email and they've already gone off for the day, and then I respond, and then they're it takes 12 hours to hear back from them. So that is in process, and
iOS as well.
It'll also support on iOS.
Excellent.
Yeah, I've already actually submitted it, so the iOS app is already updated with SetApp. So it's just a matter of getting the Mac app approved.
And all the podcasts I'm on and this show, we always promote SetApp. I think SetApp is a great platform. Our hearts and prayers go to the folks in Ukraine. I want to support them even more so. I've been a SetApp subscriber for years, and they just provide you guys as developers just a great outlet to be able to put your app out there and to share it with the world, especially the Apple enthusiasts and they just recently, within the last year or two, did the iOS support, which is awesome. So I'm really super stoked. A couple other future things I was going to ask you about, and then we're going to kind of get into your pricing and subscription plans that you've gone through here. Any plans for the Apple Watch? Are you thinking about it in the future at all?
Yes. So the next two big features I have on my list that are apparent in their absence would be the Apple Watch and CarPlay.
Okay, I got to get. I read on my list here.
Those are the two.
Good.
Yeah, those are the two. Yeah, those are things that I'm like I've been hearing. People have been telling me about them. I'm very aware, and they are very high on the list of priority.
Okay, awesome. I think CarPlay would be a good start. I don't think Apple Watch is for my opinion. I think CarPlay should be the first one to go with, and then Apple Watch after that. So.
I would second that. Yeah, I think you're
right. So no, that's good to hear, because I was you may be thinking maybe on a third platform, or maybe Apple TV is a possibility, or
Apple TV is difficult with their storage system. They don't let you store a lot on the device, so a lot of it has to be served through web services. So it would take a bit of migration on my back end to get there.
Gotcha.
But I won't rule it out if an app keeps going, it keeps going, and I'll find places to put it.
We're going to be keeping supporting you. So I like how you've laid out your plans. You have the free trial, which is great. And then once the free trial runs out, what was it to subscribe then for the month?
So there's 2 subscription options.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking at the free trial. Then you have the pro and the premium. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. I'll let you talk.
There's basically 2 tiers after the free version, because the free version gets you most of the app, right? It gets you.
So it's always free.
It's always free.
Great. Okay.
You can always build your library. There's no limits on how many podcasts you add or how many groups you add or any of that. Okay. You have access to running the Up Next playlist as a free user, and you can still search and use Discover and all that. You know, you might see a banner ad every once in a while, but that's to help pay for the services.
Need support.
So yeah, and then so if you want to go off the free plan, I have added a one-time purchase plan, which is the Pro plan.
That's great.
And so the Pro plan comes in and says you can basically unlock all the advanced audio features, which is the custom audio engine work I did. So that's silent skip, that's voice boost, that's basically just that whole package of a custom audio player with its advanced features. And also you can also choose skip sounds to play. And so if you want to like have a funny sound play when the silence is skipped, you can do that. And it also unlocks the customization options on iOS. So you can get custom tint colors, the custom color schemes. And later I like to add, app icons, things like that from further customization.
Oh, cool.
So that's the Pro plan. So that's basically like you're a podcast enthusiast. I want the better audio experience, but I don't want to be tied to a subscription. So I'm going to pay a one-time payment and I'll unlock the continuous playback, the audio features, that stuff. So then the full-blown plan after that is the premium subscription plan, which unlocks. Oh, I should step back. The Pro plan, I also made it so that it is purchasable for iOS and it will unlock on iOS, but it does not transition over to macOS. So you have to actually make a Pro purchase for Mac and iOS.
So it's going to cost,
you want Pro on both.
Cost you $40 if you want to do both.
30.
Oh, 30. Okay.
Because it's 10 on iOS.
20 it's lower on iOS. Okay, great. Awesome. Okay.
Yeah. It's lower on iOS.
For those who are not big fans of subscriptions, I understand. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's an option for those people who I definitely got feedback and said, I just can't do another subscription, so please give me another option. And this is me trying to serve that to them and get them
good idea
as far as I can without going broke, trying to keep the app alive.
That's
right. So then the premium plan is your subscription plan that has 2 different pricing tiers. So that would be a monthly plan and a yearly plan. The monthly plan comes in at is it $1.50 a month? The yearly plan is $12.50 a year. And that unlocks everything. And that not only unlocks all the pro features for iOS, but also macOS. So it's like one subscription unlocks all the platforms, all the features for everything. And that's how I'm trying to hook them. Right?
I was very impressed to see how you laid this out. And if someone just wants a free trial, I'm sorry, because it says free trial, threw me off here. The free version, and if it meets your needs, that's great. But I highly recommend any developer that does this great work. You should support them and go with at least one of the 2 plans. If it's just a one-time purchase, that pro plan should work out perfect. But
100% agree.
I like that I like that premium subscription. That's nice, and I've done that before in other podcatchers. So they're very reasonable with that, and you get some nice little perks with it, and at the end. So, but
it tries to reward loyalty, right, and tries to get people to embrace the platform and stick with it. So
no, this was great. I'm glad you were able to come on the show here and talk a little bit about the app. If you can, tell everybody where everybody can find you and the app, and thank you for being here.
Okay. Yeah. So, I guess I could show out my website. It's grantdavisinteractive.com is my professional website with my portfolio and things. And then the app itself is at MEMIRROR and yeah, I'm on Twitter with just at Mimir Podcast app. And I think that's pretty much it. I'm not too active on socials. I'm kind of one of the guys that doesn't do a lot of that, but that's where you can get in touch with me.
Great. Oh, great. Really appreciate you being here, Grant. It was an absolute pleasure.
Appreciate it very much, Dave. Thank you for giving me a chance to come on and talk about it.
That's a wrap for this special episode. Thanks again to our special guest, Grant Davis. Please send your comments, questions, and suggestions to our email address, feedback@intouchwithios.com. You can follow the show on Twitter at intouchwithios. Support the show by buying me a coffee at intouchwithios.com/coffee. We would really appreciate it. You also can become a patron of the show by going to patreon.com/intouchwithios. Like Pat is our current subscriber, as well as our new Patreon supporter, Tom W. did. We have 2 tiers available to support the show. We would really appreciate it. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe so you are notified when we are live streaming on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/intouchwithios, where you can watch and listen to past shows. Visit In Touch with iOS magazine on Flipboard, where many of the topics we discuss are flipped into the magazine. The link will be in our show notes. You can subscribe to the show in your favorite podcatcher, which includes our new favorite podcast app, Mimir, and many others. But better yet, go to our website at intouchwithios.com, where all the links to all the ways to listen to us are there. I am Dave Ginsburg, and you can find me on Twitter at DaveG65. I hope you enjoyed this special episode. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk again soon.